always been there. It's just becoming more aware. What is important is that we change the narrative of these sightings, and I think that is the most important. The problem is the narrative. What is the narrative that goes around the word shark?
Yeah, exactly. So we are actually live, but
okay,
to now we have 2 viewers. Let's wait some 2 minutes, and then we can start. We can kick off. So, what were you talking about?
We were talking about how drones can be used positively within the shark observations and shark science community, and how other people might have a different perception of the drone footage collected that has sharks on it.
So far, I've seen I have a friend. He is off the coast of San Diego, and he drones daily. Great whites interacting, ignoring surfers, paddleboarders, swimmers, all sorts. Like the entire community of local surfers just sits there with these great whites, and there's the daily videos of these interactions. And to me, that is extremely positive when people say, "Oh, as soon as you're in the water, you are this," and it's just kind of like. So I think drones have more advantages than disadvantages at this point.
Yeah, I think that's quite valuable footage, actually, because the narrative quite often is a different one. It's oftentimes that you hear people say, as soon as there is a shark in the water, you're in danger. But here we can actually see that that's not the case.
Correct.
That's really nice.
We kind of see the norm. The norm is there's people in the water, waist deep level, ankle deep level, and there's a shark swimming by them. They don't even realize there's sharks swimming by them. The sharks are totally aware of them, and they keep on swimming and ignoring them. And that seems to be the norm in this drone footage is more than the exception.
Let me just check, because I cannot see that we are live.
I see live on the corner.
Yeah. But when I go to our Facebook page,
in the meantime, I'm having a look at the YouTube channel to see if we're live on there. But I think we might be.
Yeah, because we have one viewer. Welcome.
Not one of the 3 of us?
That's very strange. Yeah, so the live is not visible.
Oh, that's a pity.
So,
can I do anything to assist you?
No, just maybe continue talking about drones.
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, sure. We have one comment. Oh, hi. Nice meeting you.
So yes, the live is now going.
I can see it on YouTube. So anyway, that was a really nice live with Sol on the drone topic for European Researchers Night. I really enjoyed that. And what I also enjoyed, I listened just the second time just before, was the podcast that you did with Crystal on the sharks. I really, really liked it. And there were some valuable messages in there. And thank you so much for jumping on the podcast with us as well. And I just see we're live now, so we can officially kick off, I think.
Yes. So welcome everyone to the Healthy Seas question and answer with Cristina Zenato. I'm Isadora, social media manager at Healthy Seas. Cristina is an ocean and cave explorer, dive instructor, and conservationist, and she's known for her work with sharks. Thank you so much. We are really happy that you're joining today. It's a real pleasure for us. And let me also introduce Ramona, the education coordinator at Healthy Seas. She started 2020 volunteering at Healthy Seas and is currently studying biology and is an assistant dive instructor driven by her love for underwater biology and ecosystems. So welcome everyone. We're super happy. And I would say let's jump right into the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the lovely introduction, Lisa. I'm really happy to be on here with Cristina. And the first question that we would have for you is, what motivated you to become a shark behaviorist, and what aspects of your work are you most passionate about?
Well, I live and work my life by a word, which is exploration. And exploration for me is of the unknown. Of course, everybody thinks exploration of the unknown, but it's also exploration of the known. And what happened is, when I became a diver, the known about sharks was very different to what I was experiencing. So I enter the water and people say, oh, sharks will do this and sharks will do that and this will happen and this will happen. But then I enter the water and I realize it's just like, well, not really. Oh, no, this is not really the known that you shared with me. So for me, it became important to learn more about sharks, not the biology in itself, more the behavior and who they are and what they do and what is their role in the oceans, but what is also the role related to us, so that I could surface a different message about them. Because I come from a love from sharks, and that's basically the short answer is I love sharks. I always love sharks, and I want people to love sharks, but I realized the message was not getting there. The two parts that I love of my job is, one, the time that I literally get to spend on the water with them. And sometimes people think is like this complicated work, but it's actually being patient, being in the water and watching and taking the time to observe the behavior as it unfolds. So spending a lot of time doing somewhat what looks like nothing. That's the best part. And then the second part is obviously being able to share this. So the educational component, being here. Thank you, Healthy Seas, for having me, sharing part of my message, being able maybe to convince and change people's mind one at a time.
Well, thank you so much for being on here. And the message that you bring across is like really, really valuable, we think. And it's also really amazing to see how you remove the hooks from sharks and how they come to you for help. So what was the situation when you first removed a hook, and were you at all nervous?
I don't know. It's a question that I receive all the time and I cannot answer. Does anybody remember the first time they remove a thorn from their dog's paw? And I don't, but we do that, right? The dog comes out and lifts the paw and is like, mama, and you go and remove the thorn and you throw away the thorn, but you never think, oh, was my first time doing this. And so automatically for the sharks goes back to this love that I have for sharks, and specifically the love that I have for the group of Caribbean reef sharks that I interact with. Removing the hook was an automatic gesture of seeing a shark that was uncomfortable and somewhat in pain and was doing erratic behavior due to the presence of the hook. And I was like, well, I'm just going to try to remove it. So no, I don't have a memory. I've never been nervous. I've been very careful on evaluating. Primarily, I'm nervous about making sure that the removal of the hook does not damage the shark further. So there's an evaluation. I'm going to try to remove the hook. But if the hook needs some time or the shark needs some time, I'm just going to give them both that.
Wow. You mentioned some erratic behavior that indicated that the shark was disturbed by the hook, that it was in pain. And so are there some behavioral patterns that you can usually observe that are quite specific to Caribbean reef sharks compared to other groups of sharks?
Well, Caribbean reef sharks is one of those species that does not have a problem being gregarious, meaning staying together. Their species of sharks are more solitary. They're more affected by the presence of other animals or other sharks. They tend not to move too far. There's been some research that said that maybe they had a range of about 200 miles, but otherwise they tend to be more placed locally. They live in Caribbean temperate kind of water. That's where the name is. So Caribbean reef sharks are not to be confused with like gray reef sharks from the Pacific, for example. and that would say that's what they do. They shows us some hierarchies when I interact with them. They shows us some either presence of power depending on size. Size seems to matter. The bigger girls seem to have more of a self-assurance and presence. The smaller ones are more tentative and more inquisitive in a certain way. The one that you have to look out for more because they're trying to figure it out, everything that is going on. So there's definitely that. I've seen the bigger girls disciplining the younger ones. Sometimes similar, very similar. I don't want to compare them, but similar in behavior. When we brought in our third rescue, he was a puppy, and my adult dog, one of them, would be annoyed by him. So as the puppy went over to him, the adult dog would be like growling and go, kind of move away. And so we had to remove the puppy because obviously the adult dog had the right of way. And so with the bigger ones, I've seen sometimes the bigger ones, if the small ones is too much in her face, so she'll give her a little snatch, right? Just kind of like same as that growl that I've seen my dogs doing. So definitely different behaviors than many other species, from even the ones that are in the same waters with them.
Wow, that's super fascinating to see that they also share like a hierarchy structure within their groups, even though they're more solitary animals. And I mean, there's a lot of talk about climate change, ocean pollution, all of these like really important topics. And so would you say, or is there research on environmental factors such as changes in water temperature that might affect the behavior and movement of sharks?
Well, not specifically in the group that I work with, but yes, there is research. There's also indirect research of what a catastrophic event can actually do to a local population. There's been problems in the area of Tampa, Florida, for example, with the red tide and the fact that the water was so warm that the baby sharks did not migrate to the Florida Keys, causing then when the excessive red tide came in, causing the death of a lot of these baby sharks, which should have already left. From an environmental point of view, there are other studies, for example, on some of the chemicals that we put in the water that accumulates into the bodies of apex predators, including sharks. For example, one of the biggest concern is shark meat contains a lot of mercury, which we know is a really bad substance should someone decide to consume any meat of that level. So tuna, swordfish, sharks all contain that. And obviously we know where that comes from, our pollution. Closely to the Caribbean reef sharks, for example, and it's a study that I would like to see being conducted, is Caribbean reef sharks reproduce on size, not age.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So that means, for example, and in the Bahamas, the sharks are protected. So where I am is very good for the sharks because they are protected. But protecting sharks means also protecting their nursery grounds. It means to protect their babies. It means to protect their food or their food sources. And imagine if we depleted enough, right? And again, these are theories, but they're theories that are applicable to the story of the Caribbean reef sharks. Enough that maybe they lack some of the food or enough nutrition, would then they be able to reach the correct size to be reproductive. Remember, humans start reproducing if we actually go underweight. If women go too low in weight, anorexia nervosa causes the loss of reproduction capabilities because the nature goes, you don't have enough energy to reproduce. And so imagine if they couldn't reach the size. So there is a lot to be discussed. And you want to call it climate change, you want to call it pollution, but there's something happening. We know that is a drastic changes that are happening. Whatever you want to say, it's natural or it's not natural, and they are affecting our sharks populations.
That's super interesting. And then having a catastrophic event and a red tide coming in, killing offspring might even be more, disastrous for the population overall. just for our watchers, viewers that are not familiar with the term red tide. So this is an accumulation and massive production of bacteria that colors the water red and is actually toxic if it is being consumed by animals and humans alike. Is that correct?
Yes, and it also absorbs the oxygen. Plus, remember, the red filters the light, so it actually blocks the entire photosynthesis and basically becomes like putting a lid that closes everything off and anything that lives underneath it. So you lid the surface of the ocean.
So this was quite deadly to the young. And
this was a study done by different professors from Tampa. For example, here in the Bahamas, in 2019, in September, we saw a catastrophic event through Hurricane Dorian. I think the strongest hurricane to ever sit on us for 36 hours.
Wow.
At over, it was 280 miles per hour. So you're looking at 350 kilometers per hour wind for over 36 hours. And there's vast areas on the north shore of our island of mangroves that are still trying to recover. We went there the other day and it's barely now coming back. Well, these are nursery grounds. Wow. Again, we don't have all the data, but it would be interesting to see what was the level of animals in there prior to Dorian and what it is after. Now, this is a natural event, but the natural event affected the outside of the island as well, the inside of the island. One of the things, for example, we ran out of fresh water.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine that's been quite tough on humans and nature alike. Or yeah, we are connected to nature, but you've also spoken about the size being more that they produce rather on size than at a certain age, and how also the food that they consume can change the size that they grow to at a certain age. So sharks are predators, but a question that can arise is, do sharks also have predators, or are they at the top of the food chain?
They actually do. So sharks, again, let's go through the word sharks, because it's very hard to do, and I am in difficulty sometimes. Right? There's over 500 species of sharks, and we know the smallest shark in the world is the size of a pen. It's a dwarf lantern shark. And here it is. Here's the smallest shark of the world, and the biggest shark of the world is the whale shark, which is also the biggest fish. It can reach up to 12, 13 meters in length, right? And is a plankton feeder. So could we say that this shark is somebody else's prey? And I would say probably, most likely. So sharks are predators. Some are apex predators. Some are also mesopredators. I mean, they live in the middle of the web and they become food of someone else as well. They're feeding on someone else. We don't have vegetarian sharks. We have filter feeders, plankton eaters like the basking shark, the whale shark, the megamouth. But if you consider the phytoplankton, that's still considered basically an animal. But all of them tended to have different roles. Now, there's some sharks that are really almost on the top. But then nature lately just showed us that they are not. Anybody remembers what is happening in South Africa with the killer whales that are hunting down the great whites and flipping them over and just eating their liver? So I would say it's a mix and mix. Lions, when they become old, when they can't hunt anymore, they become somebody else's food. Yeah. So sharks, although they're predators, will also eventually in their life cycle become somebody else's food, because that's how nature works.
Thank you so much. That makes perfect sense. And we actually have a question from our viewers, and it goes like following. I've seen footage of cameras that were mounted on whales. Is there something similar for sharks?
They've done some. very briefly. There's also done a remote satellite and video cameras that then pop out after a couple of hours or 4 hours or half a day, and then you have to go and retrieve it, and you can actually find the footage of the shark, what they've been doing, how they're wind swimming. So yes, there is, to give you completely the source of where to find them right now. I will have to do a little bit of research, but I know they're out there, and I've seen quite a few.
So what is currently the process of studying the behavior of sharks? Someone asks, are you a diver? And we can already say, yes, you are. But in general, what is the process? And do you collect any footage during studies? If they are not mounted on the animal, do you do like general camera footage? Or
yeah, we do. Every time we're in the water with them, we try to collect footage.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it, sometimes maybe I don't collect footage, but is observing while we'll collect footage. Understanding behavior is spending time with them. And that is the most difficult part of understanding animals' behavior. Imagine if you were Jane Goodall and you're studying primates. You can comfortably, not really, but you can sit in the forest, and you can elect to sit for several hours while feeding yourself, drinking water, being in an environment that is conducive to your life. Underwater, we have only so much time. So there's other people that do, for example, baited cameras. So they'll put a little bit of food by a camera and then study how many times they can see the sharks swimming by the camera. That gives us somewhat of an idea of presence. Some people do what is called pinging. So they'll put a detector into the shark, and then they'll put different stations, and as the shark passes by the stations, it literally pings, and it's kind of like, oh, here comes Ramona, ping, 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 ping. We know where Ramona is going, and figuring out a little bit of that. My work is more about watching them rather than just, okay, Ramona is going up the river and it's that time of the year, maybe she's leaving her puppies, is more about what are they doing when they're underwater? Mm-hmm. What is their energy level? What is affecting them? How are they moving? Why they're all of a sudden taking off into the blue and then coming back, or taking off to the surface and going down. And that brings like a wider picture. And it's very interesting how the anthropic presence has a change very much in their behaviors, but like even other things, for example, like weather patterns, the arrival of hurricanes, water temperatures really affects how they act in that moment or in that season.
That is super, super interesting. And also, yeah, it's like you said before, it's super hard to study these things, I can imagine, because underwater, your time is limited. Your range of motion is also limited. Your range of depth is very limited when you're going as a diver, which brings us to a really special environment, which is caves. So you are also a cave diver, but are there any sharks that live in caves?
One of my presentation's titles is, I wish there were sharks in caves. And that somebody said, yes, there are. Yes, they are at the entrance of the caves, not in caves. Mm-hmm. Caves for us, for underwater, when we talk about underwater caves, is any tunnel that is beyond the entrance. So in the eternal darkness, sharks will not venture in that. But there are sharks like the silkies I've seen the lemons, I've seen the Caribbean reef sharks, I've seen the white tips and the black tips. They'll rest at the entrance of the caves. And they'll use the flow, for example, for ventilation. But some of them most likely are also looking for food, because the entrance of some of our blue holes attract a lot of fish life, quite a lot of diversity. And so they might be in there like nurse sharks looking for lobsters and things like that. So there are sharks quite often at the entrance of the caves. Sometimes you come back from a cave dive and they're just sitting there, but not inside the caves. They're just using that transitional environment for their own advantage.
Mm-hmm. Do you have an educated guess on why they don't go into the actual cave, into the dark. Is that because they depend on their side, but then they have all the other, oh my god, in English the word,
all the other senses, ampullae of Lorenzini.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much. So what do you think? Why don't they go deeper?
Well, the caves are not necessarily deeper.
I meant deep into the cave.
Deep into the cave. Sure. It's another world. There's no need for them to go in there. And the animals that we usually encounter in the caves, whether they're ocean-based caves or land-based caves, are usually microscopic animals with a very, very low metabolic rate because they live in a fairly hypoxic environment, so low oxygen and eternal darkness. So why would an animal of that size go into caves? Now, I've seen spiny dogfish in the Channel Islands in some of the alcoves, but we're still talking about where you can see daylight, and obviously there's an obvious access to the entrance. So if you're telling me the dome at the entrance, yes, there are sharks. If you're talking about cave, as I understand cave, which is the eternal darkness beyond the dome at the entrance, there's no need for them to go there. There's nothing for them to go there. No reason.
So the reason they might be at the entrance might also be the availability of food. Where we get to a different topic, which is a question that comes from the audience as well, I think, is do sharks unlearn how to be a predator if they get food by scientists or tourist operator?
Very good question. Did sharks unlearn to hunt food since we started fishing 40,000 years ago?
No.
You know who are the first people that fed sharks? Fishers. 40,000 years ago, when we made it to the ocean and we start canoeing and went fishing, that is the first time the sharks were like, hey, there is another access to something that is considered an easy meal. So the answer is no. You cannot unlearn. They cannot unlearn because their nature is opportunistic feeding. Where there's food, I will go and feed. When there's no opportunity, I will redirect and find the next opportunity. So they can unlearn. We see that here in the Bahamas. They haven't unlearned. The sharks remain sharks.
That's great. So that can be called a very common misconception that if sharks get food somewhere in an easier way, that they might forget how to be a predator. But what are some more common misconceptions about shark behavior that you encounter in your daily work?
Oh, where do I start? Where do I finish? So one of the most common ones that I notice, it keeps coming back, is that there's a false perception that sharks cannot stop swimming or they will suffocate to death. While there are few species that have what we call only rum ventilation. So all species have rum ventilation. They're capable of swimming through the water, have water flow through their mouth into their gills where they extract oxygen. The majority of shark species also have something called buccal pumping, buccal pumping. And so while sitting motionless on the ocean floors, they can open and close their jaws, and they can actually force ventilate the water through their gills where they will extract oxygen. So I think that is one of the biggest ones that I see as a misconception. Now, like I said, there are species that only have rum ventilation, but for whatever reason, those species have become the norm, but they're actually the exception.
Okay.
The other one is, number two is, we were just discussing now with the drones, is, the moment you hit the water, you're automatically food. And so that goes into that conversation again. We have over 500 species of sharks. So the moment you hit the water, my brain actually goes, where are you? Where are you in the world? Oh, I'm in the Bahamas. Okay. And which island? Oh, I'm on Grand Bahama Island where Cristina lives. Okay, excellent. What part of the island are you? Oh, I'm on the Tiger Beach. Okay, Tiger Beach is 2.5 hours from shore in the middle of the little Bahama Bank. What species of sharks are here? Oh, the tigers, the lemons, the bulls, and the Caribbean reef sharks. Or I'm on the South Shore where Cristina goes. What is here? The Caribbean reef sharks. Well, what are you doing? I'm on the surface, I'm scuba diving, I'm spearfishing, I'm just sunbathing on a paddleboard. I don't know. So are you doing an activity that may attract sharks' attention? Like, let's say you're spearing. So you have like a thrashing fish at the end of your spear, or are you paddleboarding? Now we go, what species are here? So let's say of all of this, you're here on the South Shore of Grand Bahama and you're paddleboarding. And there are 3 species, well, we have 4 or 5 that live on our South Shore. But let's say you paddleboard over a nurse shark. The nurse shark is going to go, oh, wow, big shadow. I wonder if that's a predator. And actually either remain still or kind of like move away from this shadow. Mm-hmm. If you paddleboard over a Caribbean reef shark, it might have similar reactions. Like, that's a big shadow. I'm not sure. Is it going to trigger, that is my prey? No. So even the Caribbean reef sharks will go, Now, you paddleboard over a tiger shark, which usually feeds like on surface breathing turtles. You might, and I'm saying you might, because we have millions and millions of people going in the water every day here in the Bahamas, and we have tiger sharks. You might trigger their, I wonder, and most likely will take them a couple of takes and go, yeah, no. Right. So that automatic concept, as soon as you hit the water, you're automatic food. It's like, that's not true. Where are you? What are you doing? What species of sharks are you in the water with? Who lives there? And then furthermore, what are the conditions?
Yeah.
Is it clear water? Is it murky water? Are you in the middle of a bait ball in South Africa? Yeah. Just be mindful. Right. And again, they're not coming for you. They're coming for the bait ball. But I think that is another one of the big misconceptions. And I think the fourth one is blood. If you're bleeding, can I go in the water with my... Yes, you can. Sharks are not attracted by the scent of human blood in itself. It's not in their genetic code, is not in their DNA, is not. So then some people brings up the few and far between examples that prove this concept correct. It's like, but the USS Indianapolis is 76 years ago. And it's kind of like, yes, there has to be a series of triggers, a return on investment that a healthy human being on her, and let's call it period, does not send out as an information. And so, no, they're not literally attracted if you have a little scrape on your knees, or if you cut your finger, or if you have your period by our human blood.
Yeah, I actually have heard that question myself. I'm like, you're going on holidays. That's great news. Really nice tropical location. I'm sure you will enjoy your swims. And they go like, it's going to be that time of the month. I can't go in the water because of the shark. And I go like, excuse me? I don't think that's the way it works.
No, it doesn't.
So it's good to have it confirmed now. So that might surprise some people. And what are the things that surprise you in shark behavior? Like some of surprising encounters that you had, some surprising behaviors that you were able to observe. Is there anything that ever took you like being like, oh, wow, I didn't expect that?
I think one of my cutest one, which was some time ago, is realizing how shy a 4-meter great hammerhead can be. How very wary of their environment they are, how very concerned they are with everything that breathes, moves around them. It's just very, very kind of cute. It's kind of like you're a 4-meter great hammerhead. You realize how big you are, but they coming in and they're kind of like, I'm not sure about your bubbles. Your bubbles. So there's some of that. The other one that still surprises me, and I have we haven't really done much about that to understand it, but is when I start removing hooks the fact that the moment I start removing hooks from mine and known sharks, because if the audience doesn't know this, but I work with a regular group of sharks. Some of them I've known for 13 and a half years, like Grandma, Hook, Croak. They've been there for 13 years. But I start removing hooks from them, which they traditionally collect. Sharks that I'd never seen before start showing up with hooks, and they only show up the moment I start doing the removal of the hooks. And that tells me that there is a way of transferring information. Sometimes the humans will limit the concept of communication into the maybe verbal communication, or nowadays this communication. But I think there's and I think we know there's very much communication beyond the written, spoken, or even sign word, which is the communication of hormonal secretions, the communications of body movement, the communication of scent, right? The communication of hearing. But it's still, to this day, every time I start removing hooks and a new shark shows up, it's just like, even especially when I'm down there with Kevin, I say, hey, look, another new shark, huh? Almost like I am surprised by something that I keep observing because it's so unique.
Wow, that's really fascinating. And yeah, totally. In the animal kingdom, there are so many ways and facets to information transfer within a species and within or between species. It's totally fascinating. And when the sharks come together, you mentioned before they are rather solitary animals, or at least the Caribbean reef sharks that you work with.
The Caribbean reef sharks are fair okay being gregarious. Maybe we
misunderstood. That was it. Yes. That way round.
Yes.
But are they like interacting in a playful way with each other as well? Do they know play or?
No, I would say no. They don't know play or understand play. I would say from an emotional point of view, sharks is one of my favorite animals because of that. Is a very, what you see is what you get. And I usually make this joke and I say, sharks have no mean bones in their bodies. It's kind of like, aha, they don't have bones. I know that. But they actually don't have that extreme emotional range. And I think that is one of the other mistakes that people make. They give sharks human connotations. Oh, the shark is vengeful. Oh, the shark retaliates, or the shark is defensive of their territory. They're actually very easy animals to be with. Very direct. What you see is what you get. But I would say playful is not something that we can associate with sharks. Not that I have observed.
Super interesting. Thank you. We are circling back with, I think, a community question to the diet of Caribbean reef sharks in particular, which would be, do they also eat algae, or are they 100% carnivorous?
I personally never observed eating algae. I would say they're 100% carnivorous. Caribbean reef sharks have a fairly variety diet, stem from fish all the way to some crustaceans and mollusks. Usually, I actually observed them once, and I was walking the beach, and there was unfortunately a stranded dead dolphin, and there were some Caribbean reef sharks consuming the dead dolphin. Now, Caribbean reef sharks will not instigate the consumption of a live, healthy dolphin. It's too big of a prey for them. But because the dolphin had been cut by propellers and was dead, they were Caribbean reef sharks consuming it. So they're very much opportunistic, very much cleaners of the reef. But seeing them eating algae, no, never.
Are there other species of sharks for that it's known that they consume plant or algae matter on occasion?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't have that answer. Maybe there's a scientist or someone that is listening to this and can answer these questions better than I do. The filter feeders obviously feed both on zooplankton as well as phytoplankton. And I do apologize, early on I said phytoplankton and I said that's animal matter. But that is the only ones that I know do consume what is let's say, algae matter, or the filter feeders. I don't know about the sharks, and please understand, I do not know all the species of the sharks, not all of it, the behaviors of the sharks. There's certain specific species that I'm more familiar with.
Thank you. And don't worry about the phytozooplankton thing. So phytoplankton is the microalgae, and zooplankton is the microscopic animals that we find within the water column, for anyone who's listening. So we have another question that we prepared beforehand that ties in nicely with our most recent community question. It is, what are some direct actions that we can take to change public perception and create more respect and less fear for sharks?
From a public perception point of view? Is that what the question is going, or what can the public do in general?
I think it goes into what
should I answer both?
An individual person do to change the public perception.
Okay, so an individual person can carefully, very carefully, share the positive message about sharks, share more of the science-based about sharks or behavioral-based about sharks, healthy seas information, for example, my informations if they want to. They can try sometimes to also be on conversations with people and explain the difference. But I notice that people, when they're convinced or what they're convinced, when they don't know what they don't know, they will not move from that one. So that's why I said carefully, because the internet could be a very dangerous place. They can start with their family, continue with their community, reach out to the schools, maybe interact with their local museum or their local aquarium or their local organization and say, hey, I would like to come and talk about sharks. Did you know this about sharks? And so you start from where you are. People know you. Primarily also start within the language that you can speak the best, so that you can actually share that information in those different languages that maybe I don't speak. I usually bridge with other people in English, but then they go and speak languages that I don't speak, and they can become ambassadors for them. The other big one for me is, as an individual, what you can do to change the status of sharks is learn about the legislations. In the country where you can vote. When I came here in the Bahamas, sharks were not protected, but they were also not hunted. But then the world from the outside went like, ooh, you have healthy shark population. They literally went yum, yum, yum. And so we sprung into action in 2009. And I sorted out a petition, and then the Bahama National Trust and the Pew Organization, we all came together. And in 2011, the sharks were completely protected in the Bahamas.
Wow.
It's one of the most comprehensive legislations that we have in the world. If you accidentally kill a shark, you'll have to let it go, sink to the ocean floor. And the reason why is people are going, but that's wasteful. It's like, no, what you avoid is people coming in with accidentally having killed 10 sharks today and accidentally having killed 10 sharks tomorrow.
Yeah.
So if you accidentally kill a shark, just let it go. Don't. So to me is do that. Where you have the power to talk to your politicians, to change legislations. That is where you need to focus. Don't worry about, don't worry about those. Worry about what's happening in your country. As an Italian, I've been here in the Bahamas for 30 years, so it's helped the Bahamas obtaining one of the most beautiful legislations about shark conservation in the world. I'm totally embarrassed about my country. It's disgraceful. If I may say so. Italy, you're disgraceful. We have one of the worst, highest numbers of shark fin and shark meat consumption and shark fin export in the world, in Europe. One of the most lacking legislation. So followed by Spain, by the way.
Wow.
So where are you and what language do you speak and where is your right to vote? Work on that legislation.
That's such valuable advice, and it's always worth it to read up what's the local, regional, countrywide legislation on the import of, if you're not like if you're a landlocked country, also on the import of shark meat and shark fins.
Absolutely.
Which there has been a EU-wide petition as well. And so it always makes sense to read up, get your knowledge together, and then after you've gathered all the information, go and stand your case. That really can make a difference. As someone else in the
if I may,
sorry.
just one last thing. For me, it's very important when we talk about some of the topics. People go, "Well, I don't use shark fin soup." You know, there's people over there doing that, and they point the fingers. It's not me; it's someone else, and it's very natural. It becomes very defensive. Well, I don't do that, so I'm not responsible for it. But unfortunately, some of the sources. Don't worry about the consumers. The consumers will have to deal with that. But the source is, it comes actually from maybe your place of origin. So if you can fix that, so when you kind of like cancel the distribution, is one step further into the conservation. And I think that is very important, is looking to our own backyard.
Very valuable. And also, I've read and heard you say during the podcast episode that we did recently that there's squalene, which is a shark liver product, I think, is in many cosmetics and many medications, in immunization shots. So also it does make sense to do research on the cosmetics you use or viewers use every day to see that they're like shark free, but it's not that easy, is it?
It's not easy, and that is the other part, is sometimes we need to understand the two things. We don't know what we don't know. So when we approach someone, they might not know, they might not be completely familiar. So remember, you capture more flies with honey than with vinegar. And that is where the education comes out. And you can say, hey, did you know that these products contain, and actually these products do that? That is one of the issues. The other one is we might not be able to change all of it, but we can mitigate our presence. We can mitigate our consumption. And I'm a firm believer that extremes never work, is trying to find the balance and what works the best, right? And that is one step forward. And when we do small steps at a time, at the end we can run a marathon. But if we're trying to run too fast too soon, we might end up stopping halfway through because we're too tired. And so that is, do your research, do not overwhelm. So you can start with these things, okay, the legislations, or maybe it's the consumption. Did you know how many sharks are in fish and chips, for example? You know, how many, some of these names, how is a shark identified in your country? Because in Italy, I know that there's some fish without bones that people eat, and it's definitely not squalo. It has completely different names, but when you look into it, it's one of those weird species of sharks that doesn't even look like a shark, but it's a shark.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to learn. And be patient with yourself and be patient with others.
Yes. Because, it's true. But whatever you want to communicate, whatever you're talking about, when you do it in a positive way, people get inspired, and it's much more impactful and long-lasting to raise inspiration and love and passion for a topic than to raise guilt about something, because that's not going to last. So that is really, really helpful for whatever topic we're
Absolutely.
talking about. And there is one viewer with a lot of questions, which is really cool. So we have a question that I would like to rephrase into what kind of special conditions, because we talked about all the certain points before. So all the conditions that can come together that could lead to a negative shark-human interaction or an accident.
Where are you? What part of the world are you? What are you doing? What species of sharks are there? What is the weather conditions? Why are you in the water? What part of the water are you in? There is not one size fit all answer. There isn't. What are the conditions? I imagine the sharks going out with the clipboard and going check, 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 check. But what are those? Well, it depends. It depends on all these things coming together.
Yeah.
And I know some people would like to find this 100% answer or safety net, and there isn't. But to me, there is the other part. There's the 11 million people of US citizens that go in the ocean every day, and the few accidental bites that we have here and there. So is there a possibility? Yes. Is it very remote and unique? I mean, is less than trying to win the lottery. And you're saying, well, if you don't play the lottery, you'll never win. If you go in the ocean, there is a chance. But then we're going down some of, philosophical discussions that I have no clue about. What I'm saying is, no, there's no one check, 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 all of this happen. One of the things sometimes we forget about sharks, and I don't want to raise more fear, but it is part of it, is we understand that as a grown-up, I used to watch these long documentaries that followed the lion for years and years and years, till the lions was so old and so weak that it could only do this or do that. And it's like, well, what if a shark is injured? What if a shark is sick or old? And all of a sudden, the only option is that option that they always ignore because they know that it's not really their food. I know sharks look at us and they know it's like, no. But they're in a certain way, quote unquote, desperate in that moment. And so we forget that part. Could that be a reason why there is a shark that ultimately ends up biting a human? I would say there is an option, but I don't have all the answers. I don't know when, how, where, is just a thing evaluating time by time.
Thank you. And if we turn it all around, the other way around, you said before that in the piece of legislation that you were involved in, you have a paragraph that addresses the accidental shark kill and how it's to be proceeded with. So a question from the public is, are there a lot of accidental shark kills, and are there legal consequences for accidental kills?
They're not a lot. There are a few. Usually there should be legal consequences with the police, but we also have to understand the Bahamas are a marine world of people that fish and live in the oceans, and the police tends to be a little bit on the lenient. There's some negative repercussions if there is a video that is associated with an intentional kill of sharks. Then the police will proceed in investigating what happened. But if somebody accidentally kills a shark, let's say they were fishing and the shark struggled and tangled and died, usually no, there's not as many consequences. We also are 240,000 square miles of land with over 3,000 islands and keys. So there is, if you want to know if there's a gap between the legislations and the enforcement, absolutely. But the legislation works, for example, for the big ports, for import, exports, transfer, and all of that. For the little things, no. So 600 shades of gray, absolutely, for sure. But at least there's a law that if you see something being done, let's say violently, brutally by a human towards the sharks, you can actually report them. Yes, they have police consequences.
That's so good. Because there is also, like, sometimes, unfortunately, we can see reports that people mistreat sharks on purpose, and that's really horrific to watch. So I'm really happy to hear that in the Bahamas, at least, there is some legal steps that can be taken against beachgoers, fishers who are on purpose harming wildlife in this way. So Yeah, that's a good question. I like it. To turn to a more positive outlook is, why should we care about shark conservation?
Oh my goodness. Just
It's
because
also a broad question.
it's a very broad question. It's a very good question. Why should I care a big, large, toothy animals that is, far out of sight, out of mind? I totally get it. Why? Why should the average person in New York care about sharks? They don't even live by them. The answer is, and I know it's going to be one of those cliche answers, but the sharks are part of the ecosystem of the oceans. And as a predatory species in general, they are regulatory of health of the oceans and their ecosystems, but also distribution of the prey underneath them. They're kind of like similar to wolves. They'll determine how many animals will live in a certain areas depending on the predatory species that are below them. And that regulates, in a cascade effect, everything, all the way down to lobsters and kongs. So sometimes I joke and I said, how did protecting tiger sharks protect the kongs, which is a mollusk? And they're all interconnected. Ultimately, on the top of all of this, there's still the human race. And whatever some of us don't fish, don't eat fish, don't consume animals or anything like that, there are quite a lot that still do, and there are quite a lot that are still extremely dependent from it. So eliminating sharks eliminates the healthy survival of ecosystem, which most of them are coastal related and ultimately will turn into an unhealthy environment for humans.
Okay.
This broad answer.
A very good answer, though. And so the sharks help preserve the environment. And if we humans don't take care, as we should, for the environment, there are two questions that arise here. And they are, does and in which way pollution affect sharks, and how does ghost gear affect sharks? Ghost gear being lost, abandoned, or discarded fishing gear.
Well, pollution, yes, and pollution is a really, and again, a broad term, but the red tide that we're talking about, although is a natural event, for example, that has been exacerbated by pollution and increasing of water temperature in that bay. So whale sharks ingesting plastic as they filter feed and end up dead on the beach with their stomachs full of nets and pieces of plastic. That is a direct observation. We talked about mercury accumulating into the flesh of these animals. We can go, like I said, into all the other kind of, and some of the pollutions that we don't sometimes focus on and we don't think about in this. So it's really painful to be in my head sometimes. But like, I walk the beach and I look at the floodlights of all these beautiful villas on the beach, and I'm thinking, how are these floodlights affecting, for example, turtles, migratory pattern of turtles, how the turtles lay their eggs, which eventually is the food of sharks. So we have also pollutions that we don't realize. All the chemicals that we put on our vegetables and all the fields, all the things that we spray. You have this habit of saying, it's my food, it's the food of my food, so nobody can touch it. So God forbid there's a snail on the salad. And so we pollute all of that, but eventually that goes into the water. And when it goes into the water, it comes into a circle. And we could sit here, like I said, I have a presentation about this. We could sit here and say, how does this circle back? It goes from the minuscule microbe that eats it into the algae that is consumed by the conch that gets eaten, that they accumulate. So pollution does affect them, does affect us all. It's affecting us as well. Ghost nets, yes. Ghost nets, unfortunately, are one of the issues with marine life in general, not only sharks, but abandoned nets, live even, and abandoned nets, especially the giant drift nets, do affect sharks. The abandoned ghost nets obviously trap animals and nobody knows where they are and what's happening, and so nobody's there to pull them up and save them. And then some of the other nets create what is called a lot of bycatch. So they'll pull up on board a huge amount of something, and then of that something, they'll only be selected at 10%, and the rest is thrown overboard, dead or agonizing. And that happens quite a lot with certain species of sharks that feed on a certain sharks and shrimps. For example, there's an area where every time they pull up shrimps, they have, for every pound of shrimps, there's like 10 pounds of bycatch of marine life thrown back into the ocean dead.
Unbelievable.
So yes, both of them are very negative and impactful.
Thank you so much for answering and letting us know. And another community question, I think this is our second to last question, is how does the behavior of captive sharks differ from those in the wild?
That would have required for me to observe more of the sharks in habitats than I have. So I can't really vouch for the behavior in itself, like does it really change? There are two things though that for me are something that I gauge on is usually sharks in human care in artificial habitats tend to not grow to the same size that they would in the wild, especially a sharks that will design to grow big. Bull shark, great hammerhead, for example, do not go to the same size as if they were out in the wild. So is there affecting their behavior? Most likely. The difference is, I don't know, but there is a physical evidence that it affects their growth and development. And then for me is there are some animals that we don't need in habitats in order for people to fall in love, and these like huge animals that have a wide migratory patterns. And I'm going to come out and say it's a whale sharks. Whale sharks don't belong in habitats, any habitats. You can build the biggest habitat in the world and it still don't belong there. And that is my position. With the understanding, and people may like me or not for this, I do believe that aquariums, well-run aquariums, have huge capability of education, and I've seen them. They educate people from the mainland that don't have access to the ocean, don't have the financial capability to become endeavor. Is the only way that they can see something, and maybe is where you can go and do a presentation or do a campaign or ask for a change of legislation. We've done this like 3 times now in Singapore, and it's worked magnificent. We reduced the shark fin consumption in Singapore by 33%.
Wow.
But we don't need certain animals of a certain size to make people fall in love with it. Jellyfish bobbing in a tube in a current, that is perfectly wonderful for people to become mesmerized with the ocean. So like I said, I don't know about behavior, but I know it does definitely affect their size and growth.
I just found the most adorable question. Sorry, am I allowed to squeeze this the second to last one now in?
It's okay, no worries.
Do shark nurseries or preschools teach sharks not to eat people? How are they supposed to know that we don't taste nice?
Well, it's a very good question. So here's the first problem. There is no preschool. Mom, no matter how sharks give birth, they lay eggs, they have eggs in their uterus, they give life birth. No matter what the species do, you know what? Moms pop their kids and off they're gone. So there's no parental care. There's no teaching these animals what is theirs or not. There's most likely a basic instinctual triggers, right? The first 2 to 3 weeks, the sharks go around consuming their large oily liver as they try to figure things out. They're also in an environment where they can actually figure it out through instincts. Mm-hmm. How they know is, I would say, is in their genetic code. It's a 450 million years old genetic code. And I think it's quite remarkable that they're capable of understanding that, although they have to go around trying to figure it out what is, what's not.
It's really fascinating, the evolution that's behind sharks, they have survived large mass extinction events, and are some of the oldest living animals that we still have on this planet. So
And yet,
this is really, really fascinating. And yet,
in the last 100 years, some of the species have seen a drastic drop up to 37% in their numbers.
wow.
And the last 100 years coincide with the start of the Industrial Revolution, so humankind. So humans
Wow.
and sharks have interacted and have coexisted for a very long time. The disaster that is happening right now with sharks is of our modern days, of our modern way of fishing, of our modern way of consuming, in a certain way of our wasteful practices, which are all modern. Our grandparents consume differently than we do, and the generations after me does, for example. So that is a quick change. It's a 50-year change. 51
Wow.
and a half. So that is, I think that is the hardest part. It's maybe the one that we need to understand. And this is the last part, and it has nothing to do, but it's something that sometimes a lot of people bring up. They say, well, when you protect sharks, and I hear that, oh, you're not allowed to do so, their population explodes. That is the word I see. The only population that is exploding right now in the world is, anyway, sharks are being ruled by nature. Nature knows how to manage the numbers of their predators. They've done successfully so for the 450 million years. When we protect sharks and we see a possible rising in numbers, and we can address that, because it's like, oh wow, there's more sharks gathering around your boat as you fish, that doesn't necessarily mean there's more sharks in the water. There's just a specific gathering around the boat. So the entire data concept needs to be analyzed. But perhaps what we don't realize is they're going back to half of the number that they were before we start depleting them, because we do not have that data.
Yeah.
So what we feel as a shark population exploding might be even just half of the shark population that was here before we start slaughtering at the rate that we're doing right now.
Yeah,
nature won't allow a population of predators to explode in that manner. And if it does, you can say, oh, well, what about the lionfish? The lionfish exploded for a little bit and then collapsed back to its own numbers because there's only so much food to sustain a large predatory species.
That is very true. There is this oscillatory movement of predator-prey population sizes, I think. So yeah, this is really, really interesting how our own shifting baselines of our own perception of what is a lot and what is not as much is simply deducted from our own experience or the experience of our fathers, because if we think further back down the line, we simply cannot understand how many insects were there 100 years ago. We don't know. And what might be the most mosquito-ridden summer ever might just be a tiny bit of what we had 100 years ago. So we don't know that. And so that is very much applicable to aquatic systems where we simply don't have the eyes on the water, not the time that we can observe this, not the historical record that we can really rely on. And yeah, it's really transferred how much you love sharks during this last hour. And so our question would be, why do you love sharks so much that you dedicate your entire life to them? And what can we learn from sharks?
I had a childhood dream of being an underwater scuba ranger who had sharks for friends.
That's very cute.
I grew up with a family of the ocean that luckily took me to the ocean, but I also grew up with a father that said that there are no monsters in the sea, only the ones you make up in your head. And so why sharks is because I realized that the rest of the world, most of the rest of the world, did not share that feeling and I was just going to like, there are definitely no monsters in the sea, but there's the ones with 2 legs on this planet. And that was what triggered my passion. I think they're kind of, they're adorable, and they're so perfect and yet so vulnerable of our presence. Nature's created this masterpiece. It's absolute nature's connect. Yep, done. This is good. I don't need to do anything to it for the rest of. Oh wait, human kindness. So they become so vulnerable. And yeah, that's the reason why sharks. What was the other part of the question? Sorry.
What can we learn from sharks? What can we take
learn
away?
from sharks? There's so many lessons. I actually have a presentation because of 10 lessons learned from sharks. So
that sounds like a good one.
Yes. Do not judge the book by the cover. The aspect does not make the character. And that's the reason why I'm actually very much a spokesperson for bully breeds, pit bulls, Rottweilers. I mean, I have 3 in the house or so. Let's not judge by the looks, the character of someone, not just the sharks, but there's actually what can we surface from sharks. The other one that is really good is select your bite. Really select your bite. Sharks are so finicky before they go for that one bite. So many times they're like, oh no, I'm not sure. And they really double and triple and quadruple check because it's a return on investment. So when in life we want to bite down on something, make sure that it's really where you want to invest all your energy in. Do not invest your energy in all these tiny little trivial bites that bring you nothing. And I'm talking about now really paraphrasing, not real lessons, but like, what can we learn?
Yes,
so
yes.
Select your bite. Use the energy for really what matters to you. The rest, don't, because sharks do the same. They really, really put a lot of effort, and only on selected times they will go for it, because all that energy they have to put in. That's another one. And then don't stereotype. That's the next one, right? Don't stereotype.
Beautiful. Yes.
Those are the 3 lessons that the sharks will send you away with.
Great. So I would say we're at the end. We are very, very grateful. Thank you so much. You're really inspiring. And also thanks a lot to all the viewers and all the nice questions in the comments. Yeah, it was very nice.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So to all the viewers, I put Cristina's social media channels, the links to them in the comments, and also the link to the podcast episode with Healthy Seas. And be sure to check it out. There is a lot of interesting stuff to find out. And have a nice evening, everyone. And nice rest of the day for Cristina, because she's at the end of the world.
Not yet. There's no waterfall. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.